A reckless CEO's son crashed into my daughter's car and fled the scene. Hours later, the CEO himself called me, bragging that his son had immunity and that he owned the judge. He told me to drop it. I stayed calm and replied, "You have no idea who you're talking to. You have 15 minutes to hand him over." That was the moment everything changed. But before I take you there, let me tell you who I am. My name doesn't matter as much as what I've lived through. But for the sake of this story, call me James Rourke. I'm a father, a veteran, and for the last few years I've been trying to live a quiet life. My daughter, Emily Rourke, is my world. She's 16, bright, stubborn, and dreams of studying architecture. For her, I left behind the chaos of my past career and tried to build something resembling peace. That peace shattered the evening I got the call. Emily had been driving home from a study session when a car plowed into hers at an intersection. Witnesses said the driver barely slowed down before speeding away. When I rushed to the hospital and saw my daughter bruised and shaken but alive, something inside me hardened. She was lucky, but luck had nothing to do with justice. Hours later, as I stood by her bedside, my phone rang. The number was unknown, but the voice on the other end was anything but uncertain. Deep, arrogant, smooth. The kind of voice that had ordered people around all his life. "This is Richard Coleman," he said. The name hit me immediately. CEO of one of the largest construction empires in the state. A man whose face filled the business pages and whose scandals were always brushed aside with a smile. He didn't waste time. "I understand there's been a little accident tonight. My son may have been involved. Now I need you to calm down and listen. The boy has immunity. The judge is a friend of mine. The police won't touch him. So let's be sensible here. Drop it." He said those words with the casual tone of a man ordering wine at a restaurant, as if my daughter's life was nothing but an inconvenience to him. I remember looking at Emily in that moment. Her face was pale, her eyes half closed, still drowsy from the painkillers. She had trusted me to keep her safe, and here was this man telling me his son could destroy lives without consequence. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse or threaten. That's not how I was trained. Instead, I let silence stretch long enough for him to wonder if I'd hung up. And then I said, calm and clear, "You have no idea who you're talking to. You have 15 minutes to hand your son over to the police." There was a pause on the other end, then laughter. Genuine, hearty laughter, the kind that drips with contempt. 15 minutes, he said between chuckles. "You really think you're in a position to give me deadlines?" "I don't think," I told him. "I know." He laughed again, louder this time, before hanging up. Emily stirred beside me. "Dad, who was that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Just someone," I said quietly, tucking the blanket around her. "Someone who doesn't know me yet." I slipped my phone back into my pocket and glanced at the clock. The seconds ticked by, steady and cold. 15 minutes. That was all I gave him, and I already knew he wouldn't make it. Before the deadline even arrived, the phone in my pocket began to ring again. I looked down at the screen. It wasn't Coleman's number this time. The caller ID showed a blocked number, and for a second I considered letting it ring out. But then instinct kicked in. I answered. "Mr. Rourke?" The voice on the other, and was sharp, hurried, nervous. Definitely not the confident bass I'd heard before. "Yes," I said flatly. "This is Thomas Riley, legal counsel for Coleman Industries. We need to talk immediately." I leaned back in the stiff hospital chair, keeping my tone calm. "You sound worried, counselor. Your client didn't take me seriously." He hesitated. "Mr. Coleman, sometimes he lets his confidence get the better of him, but I assure you we take these allegations very seriously." "Allegations?" I repeated, a quiet laugh in my throat. "Your client's son nearly killed my daughter and ran. That's not an allegation. That's fact." Silence. I could almost hear him adjusting his tie, sweating on the other end of the line. Lawyers always think words can reshape reality, but I had lived too long in worlds where reality was blood, dust, and silence after gunfire. "I'll make this simple," I said. You got 10 minutes left on that clock. At the end of it, your client either does the right thing or I do it for him. And trust me, you don't want me involved. Mr. Rourke, may I ask?" His voice faltered. "Who exactly are you?" That question made me smile, though there was nothing funny about it. People like Coleman and his attorney thought they knew everyone worth knowing. They lived in circles of power where names opened doors and closed cases. They had no idea about men who lived in the shadows, who didn't need names to be respected or feared. I didn't answer him. I just ended the call. Emily stirred in her bed again. "Dad?" Her voice was weak. I turned to her quickly, my heart softening in a way it never had on any battlefield. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just rest. I'm here." Her hand gripped mine, faintly, and I felt the weight of everything pressing down. She was still just a child in many ways, and yet tonight she had been forced to stare death in the face. And all because some spoiled heir thought the world was his playground. The minutes dragged. I could feel my training kicking in, the slow breathing, the hyper-awareness, the steady pulse. Old instincts I thought I'd buried were returning. One by one, 9 minutes left. The hallway outside the hospital room grew quiet. Too quiet. I caught movement in the corner of my eye, a shadow lingering where no one should be standing. I rose, walking silently toward the door, every muscle tight with memory. When I pulled it open, the hallway was empty, but on the floor just outside lay a manila envelope, unmarked, slipped under the door while I'd been distracted with the call. Inside were photographs, grainy, black and white shots of me taken from a distance. Me entering the hospital, me standing at Emily's bedside, me unaware being watched. My hand tightened around the envelope. This wasn't just arrogance anymore. This was a message. 9 minutes still remained on Coleman's clock, and I realized something important. I wasn't the only one counting. I stood in that hospital corridor, the envelope in my hands, my pulse steady but sharp. Whoever left these photos hadn't come to scare me. No, this was surveillance, the kind professionals carry out, which meant someone had decided I was worth watching closely. I slipped the pictures back into the envelope and returned to Emily's room. She was asleep again, her chest rising and falling softly. I kept my voice low as I muttered to myself, "They're already making mistakes." Because if they wanted to intimidate me, they should have hidden their hand better. Instead, they showed me they were nervous. I'd seen it before. Men who believed their power was absolute, but when challenged, they overreacted. They exposed themselves. Coleman was laughing on the phone minutes ago, but now his lawyer was calling in panic. And someone was tailing me. That shift told me everything I needed to know. I had struck a nerve. The clock ticked past the 15-minute deadline. No sirens. No police calls. No sign of Coleman's son being brought in. Just silence, like the calm before a storm. I leaned against the wall, forcing myself to breathe. The weight of combat memories pressed down on me, the sting of sand in my eyes, the sound of boots on stone, the chaos of ambushes. Back then, hesitation killed. Here, it was no different. My phone buzzed again. A text this time, no caller ID. "Walk away. This isn't your war." I almost laughed. These people thought threats worked on me. They had no idea how many times I'd been told the same words in different deserts, different jungles, under different skies. Every time I'd walked straight into the fire anyway. But before I could type a reply, I noticed Emily stirring. She blinked, her eyes hazy. "Dad, was it him?" she whispered. "Who?" I asked gently, though I already sensed the answer. "The guy who hit me, I think I know him. He's been around school before. He messaged me once." Her words froze me in place. I sat down beside her, my hand tightening on hers. "What do you mean, Emily?" Her lips trembled. "I didn't want to tell you. He said things. Threats. Like if I didn't answer him, he'd make me regret it. I thought it would stop. But now..." She swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "Now I think this wasn't an accident." I felt my chest tighten, anger mixing with a cold certainty. The spoiled brat hadn't just run from the scene, he had targeted her. And Coleman knew. That's why the man had called me so quickly. That's why the lawyer was scrambling. I wanted to press her for the messages, for proof, but I held back. She was too shaken, and right now she needed comfort more than questions. "Rest," I whispered. "We'll talk when you're stronger." She nodded, closing her eyes, but her words lit a fuse in me. I rose, sliding the envelope of photos into my jacket. Someone had been watching me tonight. Fine. Two could play that game. As I stepped into the hall again, my phone buzzed once more. Another unknown number, another message. But this one was different. "Check the parking lot. We need to talk. Come alone." I stared at the screen, my instincts screaming. It could be a trap. But something about the phrasing. It wasn't Coleman's arrogance. It wasn't a lawyer's panic. It felt different. I took a slow breath, the kind that steadied me back in combat. Then I slid my phone into my pocket and headed for the elevator. The hospital corridors were quiet, almost eerily so. Each step echoed like a countdown. When I pushed open the door to the parking lot, the night air hit me sharp and cold. And standing in the shadows, waiting, was a figure I hadn't seen in years. The man stepped out of the shadows, and for a second I thought my eyes were deceiving me. "Logan," I said, my voice lower than I intended. He nodded once. Same sharp build, same piercing stare, though the years had carved lines deeper into his face. "It's been a long time, Rourke." I didn't move closer. "What are you doing here?" "I should be asking you that," he replied. "But I already know. You've managed to piss off the wrong people." I studied him. Last time we'd seen each other was on foreign soil, in a place where neither of us should have been. A mission gone sideways, blood on the sand, a decision we'd both regretted. That night had torn a rift between us that never closed. "You following me now?" I asked. "Not me," Logan said. "Them. Coleman has resources, private contractors, dirty cops, judges in his pocket. He called in favors the moment you threatened him. I caught the tail before they got too close." I glanced back toward the hospital. "So what? You're saving me out of friendship?" He smirked, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Let's not use that word. Call it unfinished business." I didn't like it. Trusting Logan was like holding a live grenade. Sooner or later it would go off. But the envelope with the photos, the shadow outside Emily's room, the nervous lawyer, they all pointed to something bigger than Coleman's arrogance. "What do you know?" I asked. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Coleman's part of a circle. CEOs, politicians, men who protect each other's families no matter the cost. When one of their kids screws up, the whole network moves to bury it. That's why." Coleman was laughing. He wasn't just talking about one judge. He was talking about the system. It made sense. Too much sense. I'd smelled this kind of rot before, in war zones where crime and politics shared the same table. The difference here was that it wasn't halfway across the world. It was in my backyard. "Why tell me this now?" I pressed. "Because I know you," Logan said. "You won't let it go, and if you go in blind, they'll crush you before you even get close. I've been tracking this network for months. I have files, contacts, pieces of proof, but I can't move alone." I let his words hang in the air. Emily's face flashed in my mind, her bruises, her whispered confession about the messages. I clenched my jaw. "You're right about one thing. I won't let it go." Logan's gaze flickered, just for a moment, to something softer. "Then we do this together. For your daughter, and for all the kids these bastards have buried under money and influence." The tension between us didn't vanish, but it shifted. For now, we had a common enemy. I exhaled slowly. "Fine. But if you cross me once," he raised a hand. "No. You'll finish what you should have finished years ago." We left the parking lot together, our steps echoing in silence. The weight of old scars hung between us, but so did the fire of a new fight. Back at Emily's room, I found her awake, her eyes glistening. She looked at Logan, then back at me. "Dad, Who is he? An old friend, I said carefully. Logan corrected me with a dry smile. Old soldier, nothing more. But Emily's gaze lingered as if she sensed there was more to the story, and deep down I knew she was right. Because the last time Logan and I had fought side by side, it hadn't ended with medals or handshakes. It had ended with betrayal. Back when Logan and I wore the same uniform, I trusted him with my life. Out there, you had no choice. You covered each other's backs or you didn't make it home. But trust had limits, and he'd broken mine. The last mission we shared was in a burned-out village overseas, the kind of place you smell before you see. Orders had been clear, but Logan made a call that went against protocol. We both survived, but men under our watch didn't. Ever since, I'd carried that weight, so when he offered his hand again now, I couldn't shake the memory of the blood that stained it. Still, Emily's bruised face left me little choice. I needed allies, even ones I didn't fully trust. We spent the next hours combing through what Logan had collected: photos, bank transfers, coded emails, even a few recorded calls. All threads of a web bigger than Coleman himself. He was right. There was a network, a ring of untouchables who cleaned up after their entitled children. Accidents disappeared. Victims were silenced. Police reports evaporated. Why keep all this to yourself? I asked as I scanned the files. Logan leaned against the table, arms crossed. You think I didn't try? Every time I pushed, doors slammed shut. Higher-ups told me to drop it. My own boss warned me it wasn't worth my career. These people have roots everywhere. I needed someone who didn't answer to anyone. And that's me, I said flatly. He nodded. That's you. It wasn't flattery. It was fact. I had nothing left to lose except Emily, and that made me dangerous. But Emily herself was growing restless. She wanted answers. When I returned to her side, she looked at me with wide, questioning eyes. Dad, why are they so afraid of you, her? Words cut deeper than I expected. I brushed a hand over her hair. Because they think money can buy everything, and I'm here to prove it can't. She nodded, but I caught a flicker in her eyes, hesitation as if she carried a secret too heavy to share. Before I could press, Logan walked in, holding a folder. Time to test the waters, he said. Preliminary hearing in the morning. The DA's office is pretending to build a case, but don't fool yourself, it's stacked against us. The next day, the courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, flashes of cameras popping like gunfire. Coleman and his son arrived in winter tailored suits, smirks on their faces. Emily clutched my hand, her other arm still wrapped in bandages. Inside, the judge barely glanced at us. He read the charges in a monotone, flipped through a thin packet of papers, and sighed. Without substantial evidence, these accusations hold no weight. Case dismissed. The words hit like a hammer. Emily gasped beside me. Logan's jaw tightened. Coleman leaned back in his chair, whispering something smug into his lawyer's ear. I rose slowly, every muscle coiled tight. That's it? I asked the judge. He didn't even look at me. That's the law, Mr. Rourke. No, I said. My voice was low, but it carried. That's not the law. That's a bought verdict. The judge banged his gavel. Order, but order was already lost. Reporters scribbled, cameras flashed, Coleman smirked, and Emily's hand trembled in mine. As we walked out, Logan kept his voice low. Told you, they own the system. We can't win in that room. I glanced back at the courthouse doors, where Coleman stood like a king on his throne. Then we stopped playing by their rules, I said. Logan arched an eyebrow. And start playing by yours? I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I wasn't even sure what my rules were anymore. But one thing was certain. I wasn't done. That night after the hearing, I sat in the living room with the lights dimmed. Emily was on the couch across from me, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes fixed on the floor. The silence between us was heavier than anything the judge had dropped on us that morning. Logan paced by the window, restless. We need leverage, he muttered. Something they can't buy their way out of. Otherwise, every time we step into a courtroom, we're walking into an ambush. I barely heard him. My eyes were on Emily. She hadn't spoken a word since we left the courthouse. Her hands fidgeted, twisting the edge of the blanket. I knew that look. I'd seen it in soldiers who carried truths too heavy for their own shoulders. Finally, I leaned forward. "Emily," I said softly, "if there's something you haven't told me, now is the time." Her eyes lifted, glassy with tears. "Dad, I didn't want you to know. I thought it would just make things worse." My chest tightened. "Know what?" She swallowed hard, then pulled her phone from the pocket of her hoodie. Her hands trembled as she unlocked it and handed it to me. He'd been messaging me, for weeks, months actually, before the accident. I stared at the screen. The messages were there, a flood of arrogance and entitlement. "You think you're better than me?" One read, "I can ruin you whenever I want." Another was even darker. "If you ignore me again, you'll regret it." And then there were the photos. Blurry shots clearly taken outside her school, her walking home, her with friends. He had been stalking her. I felt my jaw tighten, the old fire burning hot in my chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Because I thought no one would believe me. Everyone knows who his dad is. He said if I spoke up, the police would just laugh in my face. Or worse, make it harder for you. And I didn't want you to go after him and—" Her voice broke. "And end up in jail." I reached across the couch and pulled her into my arms. "Emily, listen to me. You never carry this alone again, not while I'm breathing, you hear me?" She nodded against my chest, sobs shaking her small frame. Logan stopped pacing, his eyes locked on the phone I still held in my hand. "This changes everything," he said. His voice was tight, almost reverent. "Messages, threats, surveillance photos, that's a pattern of harassment. Combine it with the hit and run and we don't just have an accident. We have intent." I scrolled. Further, my heart pounding as I played an audio file Emily had saved. The boy's drunken voice slurred, but the words were sharp. "My dad buys judges. You don't get it. I can do whatever I want and no one can touch me." For a long moment, the room was silent except for that recording echoing in the dark. Logan's eyes burned. That's it. That's the nail in the coffin. But I wasn't celebrating. I looked at Emily, her face pale, eyes red from crying. This wasn't a victory. This was a wound carved deeper than I'd imagined. My daughter had lived in fear, silent, while that boy circled her like a predator. I pressed the phone screen until it went black and set it on the table. My voice was steady, though my hands itched with rage. "Tomorrow we move. No more waiting. No more letting them dictate the pace." Emily wiped her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if they come after us harder?" I met her gaze, unblinking. "Then they'll learn what fear really feels like." The words left my mouth calm as steel, but inside I felt something shift. This wasn't just about fighting Coleman anymore. This was about making sure Emily never had to live in silence again. And as the night deepened, I realized I was no longer simply defending my daughter. I was preparing for war. The courthouse was a fortress that morning. Reporters crowded the steps, cameras flashing, voices shouting over one another as Coleman and his son emerged from a black SUV. The boy wore a tailored suit, his smirk polished for the cameras, while his father walked beside him, waving like a politician on election day. I kept Emily close, her hand gripping mine tightly. She was pale but steady, her phone in her pocket like a weapon she had finally decided to use. Logan trailed just behind us, a folder of documents under his arm. Inside, the air buzzed with anticipation. The gallery was packed. Journalists, businessmen, even a few judges who had no cases that day but wanted to witness the spectacle. Coleman thrived in it, soaking in the attention as though it were his birthright. When the proceedings began, the prosecutor laid out the charges: hit and run, reckless, endangerment, harassment. But his voice lacked conviction, his presentation deliberately weak. Coleman's lawyers pounced on every detail, dismissing the evidence as circumstantial, painting his son as a victim of exaggeration. The judge leaned forward, his tone dripping with impatience. "Unless you can provide substantial new evidence, this case is little more than theatrics." Logan rose, his voice firm. "Your Honor, We have reason to believe this is part of a larger pattern of misconduct, not an isolated incident. I request we submit additional documents." The lead defense attorney cut him off with a smug grin. "This is a distraction, a fishing expedition." Coleman chuckled under his breath, just loud enough for the gallery to hear. The sound made my blood run hot, but I kept my composure. The judge tapped his gavel. "Motion denied. We will proceed." With the evidence at hand, Emily's grip on my hand tightened. I looked down at her, and in that moment I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not fear this time, but fire. The defense attorney droned on about lack of credible witnesses, about the unreliability of teenage recollections. He sneered as he spoke. Of Emily, as if she weren't sitting just a few feet away. Something inside her broke. She let go of my hand, stood up, and spoke with a voice that silenced the room. "Stop lying." Every head turned. The courtroom froze. Emily's voice shook at first, but she steadied it, drawing strength from somewhere deep inside. "You talk like you know me, like I'm just a name on paper, but I was there. I lived it, and I have proof." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Coleman's smirk faltered. His son shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Emily pulled her phone from her pocket, her hand trembling only slightly now. "These are his messages, his threats, his pictures of me, taken without my knowing. And this." She tapped the screen. The audio recording filled the room. "My dad buys judges. You don't get it. I can do whatever I want and no one can touch me." The words echoed like a gunshot. The gallery erupted, reporters scribbling, whispers rising into shouts. The judge pounded his gavel, but the chaos only grew. Coleman lurched to his feet, face red, barking at his attorneys. His son's mask of arrogance cracked, replaced by panic. The lawyers scrambled, their polished confidence unraveling in seconds. Emily stood tall, her shoulders squared, her voice cutting through the noise. I was scared before. I stayed quiet because I thought no one would believe me. But not anymore. Not today. I watched her, pride swelling in my chest. My daughter, my Emily, had become the strongest person in the room. The judge called for order again, but this time his voice carried no authority. He was cornered, trapped between the evidence in Emily's hands and the eyes of the world upon him. And as Coleman's empire of influence wavered for the first time, I realized the battle wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about truth, cutting through the lies they had built their lives upon. And Emily had just drawn the first blood. The courtroom had turned into a storm. Reporters shouted over each other. Lawyers scrambled to salvage their case, and Coleman's son stared at the floor as if it might swallow him whole. The audio from Emily's phone still hung in the air. Impossible to deny, impossible to bury. The judge pounded his gavel, but no one was listening anymore. His face was pale, the sweat on his brow betraying the truth. He knew his name had just been dragged into the light alongside Coleman's. Coleman himself tried to recover, raising his hands like a man who still believed he controlled the room. "This is nothing but a stunt," he barked. "Fabricated evidence, emotional theatrics, none of this holds weight in a court of law." But his voice cracked, just enough for everyone to hear the fear behind the anger. Logan stepped forward, his voice like steel. "Your Honor, the defense can scream all they want, but this recording is authentic. And I have here a list of transactions, bribes, paid, cases buried, families silenced, all tied back to Coleman and his associates. You want proof of a network? Here it is." He dropped the folder onto the bench with a thud that echoed across the chamber. The gallery roared. Cameras clicked like machine guns. The walls of protection Coleman had spent decades building crumbled in seconds under the weight of two voices. A daughter refusing to be silent, and a soldier refusing to walk away. Coleman lunged toward the bench, his finger jabbing at the judge. "Shut this down, right now. Do you hear me? I own you." The judge recoiled, eyes darting to the reporters, scribbling furiously to the microphones recording every word. He knew there was no shutting this down anymore. To side with Coleman now would mean his own name dragged through the mud by the press, by the public, By history, the gavel came down one final time, not in control, but in surrender. This court will adjourn until further review. Mr. Coleman, your conduct today will be investigated. It wasn't a full conviction, not yet, but it didn't matter. The cameras had captured everything: the arrogance, the threats, the proof. The court of public opinion had already passed its sentence. As we left the courthouse, the press swarmed us. Emily stayed close to my side, but her chin was high, her eyes steady. She wasn't just my daughter anymore. She was the voice that cracked the armor of men who thought they were untouchable. Logan fell in step beside me. "You know this isn't over," he said quietly. "Coleman's network is bigger than this courtroom. They'll circle the wagons. Some of them will come. For you," I nodded. "Let them." He gave me a sideways look. "You haven't changed a bit." I almost smiled. "Neither have you, but this time we finish what we started." Later that night, after the chaos had settled, I sat with Emily on the porch. The air was cool, the stars spread wide above us. She leaned her head against my shoulder, her voice soft. "Dad, did we really win?" I thought about it, about the network still out there, about the powerful men scrambling to protect themselves. Then I looked at her, at the strength in her eyes, the fire that hadn't been there before. "Yes," I said, "because they wanted you silent, and you spoke. That's more than they can ever defeat." She was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "I was so scared." I wrapped my arm around her. "Courage isn't about not being scared, Emily. It's about standing up anyway." The night stretched quiet again, but in that silence, I felt something new. Not the calm before a storm, but the calm after surviving one. Coleman thought money could shield him forever, thought power meant immunity. But in the end, it wasn't me who brought him down. It was the truth, and the truth had a voice he could never silence.